feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review, sort of, but for a movie that's already out in theaters, and we're back at home. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Yeah, this is an interesting one as we are slowly going through the catalog of movies that we saw at TIFF and, you know, putting together reviews. Pearl was released during the festival on September 16th in North America and, has been out in theaters now for almost a week and has been doing okay for a micro budget, prequel to a horror movie that wasn't made for much to begin with and kind of was the brainchild of both director Ty West and star Mia Goth. But I think it's still worth talking about and still worth discussing in the consciousness of both, Martin Scorsese recently giving it his seal of approval, but also with, the
The
fall,
Marty stamp.
the official fall season kicking things off for spooky
It's sweater
season.
weather, baby.
Yeah.
Spooky week, spooky season.
Spooky week.
We're spooky week. It's after TIFF, as you can maybe tell. Our brains are a little mushy, but we're back at home, so we're back on video. We're back with the good microphones. We will be reviewing stuff for the next kind of couple weeks for the movies we didn't review at the festival, but we do have like 11 or so reviews up right now that you guys can check out for movies like the People's Choice winner, the Fablemans, the People's Choice Midnight Madness winner, Weird, the Al Yankovic story. We have Triangle of Sadness, Banshees of Inisherin, Empire of Light, The Whale, Glass Onion, Bros, Brother, I Like Movies. So there's like lots of stuff up for you guys to check out from TIFF right now. But then the plan is Eric and I will be reviewing stuff over the next couple weeks now that we're back at home. A little bit more lucid than we were in the tail end of the festival, back in the comfort of our own homes. And we also have a TIFF wrap-up show, which you guys can check out on the Untitled Movie Podcast channel, where we kind of go over everything we've seen and our experience as a whole at the film festival this year. So you guys can check that out as well. Just go to Untitled_movies on Letterboxd and you'll find everything. Yeah, Eric, it's sweater weather. It's like a cool 14 degrees Celsius today. I got my free Tick Tick Boom merch that I got.
That is a comfortable sweater. It is.
It
very
is.
comfortable.
It is. Probably the best stuff we can get sent by people. It's just like sweaters I can wear at home.
Yeah.
But I'm all for sweater weather, baby, and I'm all for spooky season, and I'm all for Ty West doing a weird micro budget horror trilogy now. So
Yep.
why not?
Yeah.
So I mean, kick it off. I mean, we didn't review X officially. I think I talked about it a little bit.
As my dogs bark.
That's fine. People understand at this point.
Yeah.
Like, it's still probably better than the background noise we had during TIFF.
Yeah.
I saw X much later. Who knows why? But I didn't see X right away. I did catch it on like a Sunday or Saturday morning, and
Spooky
enjoyed
Sunday?
it quite a bit for like a pretty. Yeah, a spooky Sunday. And then I enjoyed it quite a bit for like, a throwback kind of slasher kind of movie. And I didn't think I necessarily was like, oh, this Pearl character, I need a series of movies on her. But you know what? After seeing this and X, I think both movies are very, very different. But complement each other quite a bit and are a pretty solid kind of pairing, as well as now confirm that he is doing Maxine with 3 X's as the third in the trilogy as well.
Yeah, I think you just set it up perfectly. I mean, X kind of felt like this homage to the works of Tobe Hooper, specifically with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive. And it kind of played within those genre tropes of the late 1970s exploitation and with, kind of the boom of adult cinema, specifically going to theaters and being able to cash in on making movies on the fly and smaller, again, very limited budgeted movies that are kind of amateurish but would make a profit for the people that were producing them, and maybe catapult one of the stars into the stratosphere. And that's where Mia Goth's Maxine character in X comes into play. But spoiler alert for X, if you haven't seen it yet, Mia Goth is playing dual roles as the elderly woman, um, Pearl, who lives on the farm with her husband, who is basically covered in prosthetics and makeup. And the first time you watch it, you're kind of thinking to yourself, oh, is this some sort of weird, like, supernatural thing? Because when you see photos of Pearl, it's Mia Goth,
Hmm.
and then what it is, it's just simply, okay, well, she's just playing both roles. It's nothing,
Yeah.
like, overly convoluted or what have you. It's just more maybe confusing the first time you see it. With this, with Pearl, what you have here is you have Mia Goth and Ty West writing together. This is Mia Goth's first writing credit, putting together a story, a prequel that takes place in the World War One era, where we see a younger Pearl slowly but surely turn into the slasher that we will see in X. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here, specifically the dynamic between her and her immigrant parents, her German farmer parents, and specifically the mother and
Reminded me
daughter.
of my Oma so much.
Yeah, well, just the way that you have Pearl speaking in English, and then the
Yeah.
mother will
With
speak
kind of a
back.
southern accent too.
Yeah, will speak in German, and they both understand each other, but they don't speak in the same language at the same time.
Hmm.
And I found that interesting, where there's no compromise between the two, and there's this kind of um kind of like this disconnect with the generational gap, and also the matriarch of this farm seeing what Pearl is before she becomes a serial killer,
Yeah.
essentially. And so, you still empathize with Pearl in a certain way. There are moments where you feel, like any teenager, like any young adult, maybe feeling suffocated or
Hmm.
overwhelmed by either having to live at home
Their
or living in the
parents
shadow of their,
sheltering them, basically.
yeah, and
Yeah.
having to take care of their parents, or basically instill what their parents have given them and keep going if they don't want to do that. So the parents, and they're taking care of um their invalid father, who had a stroke due to influenza, which is another thing that kind of has a contemporary spin here, is
Yeah.
that you
That
have
was
the
interesting.
COVID pandemic, matching influenza, or the beginning of the flu in the early 1900s. So with that, that's a lot to kind of you know dissect and look into. But again, I think there's a lot going on with the parental kind of aspects of it. There's even this weird incestual thing going on, where you'll have Pearl taking a bath in front of her
Of her
father,
father. Yeah.
who again is incapacitated and can't really move. But there almost seems to be something alluding to some sort of abuse before he was sick, that I thought was kind of interesting in terms of its storytelling. But there's still, your classic kind of slasher gore moments and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily um feel tethered to what X was.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you said. I think Mia Goth, absolutely fantastic in this role. And what's wild watching X is I didn't even clue into the dual role thing until much later into the movie because I didn't know going in. Which is, obviously it's very clear it's someone in heavy makeup in watching X, but I didn't clue into the dual role thing until they kind of give that to you towards the second half in the last act of the movie. And I liked what X did of playing on, this older woman who sees this young woman who's beautiful and trying to make it in Hollywood, and but even though it's a porn,
Emphasis on the
but
wood.
yeah, sure. um, and I loved that juxtaposition between her looking exactly like she did when she was younger, and even though they're playing two completely different characters, just kind of like what that film dealt with, not even necessarily ageism per se, but just like dealing with um feeling young and beautiful, and how that affects you as you get older, and stuff like that too. Obviously we see here that that started when Pearl was very young as well. But like I just love the style of this movie. Couldn't be more different. But I like that idea of doing a trilogy that all is set in very different time periods, all kind of emulating or paying homage to the films of that era. This being kind of that golden age of Hollywood. I know people have used, Wizard of Oz and things like that
Well,
too
because of the
as a
scarecrow
yeah.
specifically, I said
And
in my Rogers review, it's a Technicolor terror, and
sure,
that's
yeah,
kind
I
of what
love
it
that.
is. Yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? And then I love the idea of the next one going to the 80s and emulating horror films from that era as well, right? So
and
like
the VHS
that's
boom
just
specifically.
yeah, like that's such a great idea. But then this movie kind of like relies on Mia Goth, and I think she just does a really great job as this character, and it is unsettling. It is, it's a slower burn than X, I would even say, because like it doesn't get into those horror slasher elements until maybe, the last act of the film, and it very much is just about this young girl who's sheltered on a farm who wants to make it in Hollywood, right? And ironically, we were talking about, this is still a TIFF review, so let's reference other TIFF movies. But like I said, there was this reverence for like cinema and the movies that this movie had that was like missing from something like Empire of Light, which Empire of Light is fully about that, of the experience of cinema and going to the movies. And I feel like Pearl's love for that was way more prevalent than maybe the Olivia Colman character, or
Michael
sorry, the other
Ward's.
Michael Ward's character in Empire of Light. And yeah, I just I thought the pacing was great, like the style was great. I liked that slow burn. I liked kind of the unsettling nature, beginning with that scarecrow. I like
I'm
David.
married.
Yeah, it just has a. It's just her dive into like her madness was kind of really interesting, and portraying of this like drive to wanting something so badly, right? And then if you
Yeah, because
don't
she
get
wants to
that,
become
what
a
it
dancer, right? And
yeah,
like that's her goal. Like that, like after watching films at the local cinema and kind of falling in love with the projectionist because she's also married and her
I was
husband.
just gonna mention David Core's sweat.
Yeah,
Course.
and and so while her husband's away, she kind of feels like you have this amazing monologue that comes in the last act that's about 9 minutes long, and it's all on Mia Goth,
Yeah,
and she gives an amazing performance in that sequence and throughout the entire film. But like that's like kind of like this like the final kind of showcase moment. And when you're watching that, like everything comes out. But what you just mentioned is really important to emphasize here is that you have a character who is literally so desperate to get out of the life she has been sort of given to live. And the mother says you should be grateful for the things you have, not the things that you want.
yeah,
um and with that you have to consider, okay, well, this character, no matter what she does, will never be able to find happiness, even if it is the thing that brings her the most joy. And she'll find a reason why, whether it be an excuse or not, to blame somebody else for her own you know failures. And that, I think, is interesting as well. And going back to the TIFF thing in terms of relating it to another movie or another director, she Pearl kind of reminded me of a Darren Aronofsky character, very similar to Ellen Burstyn's performance in Requiem for a Dream. Someone who's so delusional and focused on this singular goal
yeah,
that by the time they get to that moment, they've self-sabotaged themselves so much that there's no going back, and that destruction of themselves has an effect on people around them. Now, Ellen Burstyn's character in Requiem for a Dream wasn't a murderer or anything like that,
sure,
but it seemed like everything in that movie, falls apart. Where it's kind of similar here, but Pearl is such a wrecking ball in her own right that when things don't go well for her, you're waiting for that big moment, that outburst, that simmering
pent up, yeah,
psychology to kind of wreak havoc on those around her. And sometimes the people that are, testing her patients, they don't deserve to die, but at the same time you can understand, from because it is from her point of view, that these characters aren't very compassionate or understanding, even her sister-in-law, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Mitzi, is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all that too. And I think this movie could be watched without ever seeing X, and I still think that you would
It is a
get a
prequel.
lot
You
out
could
of
see
it.
this before X.
Yeah, but I also think that it does a really great job without being, and I think maybe because it's so close to X, like both being released in the same year, that all those nods to X with the alligator, with the pitchfork, with the axe, with like all
With
the
even
different
porn,
things
right?
that,
Like the
yeah,
underground kind of quote unquote smut
exactly.
of the time.
Yeah, all of that stuff I thought was done in really well, and maybe it's because there wasn't so much distance. Like, say this came out 10 years after X came out, then maybe some of that stuff would be a little bit more like, okay, you got a nod to everything that happened in X. But I think when you're shooting these so close, almost back to back, that like it does tie those two films
Tie.
together quite a bit. And then I just also liked the setting, because again, being so familiar from how it looks in the 70s in X, like I liked seeing it in 1918, and at the height of this farm being, her mother's, and things like that. And I will say, yeah, this her mean mom reminded me of my mean Oma. But not in a good way. Like in this movie, it's very different. But like it just also my Oma being, immigrated from Germany, and it just felt very believable. And my mom probably dealt with it more than even I did, but just her accent and the way she was talking to Pearl felt very authentic, even though it's heightened in this movie. Like from a personal experience, like my Oma, a wonderful woman, but was very German, and that is exactly it, is like very kind of to the point and borderline mean at times, but still had your best interests in mind. And um it just kind of brought me back to that. May she rest in peace. But so I like the relationship with her family, even though it's disturbing, and obviously where it goes is awful. But I really actually kind of dug this, and like I said at the beginning, like I really feel like these couldn't be like more different in style and everything. But I feel like Ty West has found like a really interesting way to have a central character, or two different characters, I guess, with Maxine and Pearl, played by Mia Goth, and then kind of exploring the horror genre, exploring movies in general. And
And
I'm kind of,
the pornography
yeah,
industry and stuff like
industry
that
and
as
things like
well,
that. Yeah.
and the taboo nature of it. I think there's two other things I want to expand on that you already mentioned that we haven't really yet. I think it's also really important to, we've talked about, her being the daughter of German immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
but taking place during World War I,
One. Yeah.
and seeing that this German family, this family of three, have basically kind of isolated themselves in
Right.
their farmhouse away from the rest of the town. They only, uh, Mia Goth's character Pearl only goes to town to pick up medicine for the father, and then is
I even
supposed to
like the
come
look of
right.
that town too.
Yeah, yeah, and so she's supposed to come right home, and I think that that does a really fascinating and more compelling, or has a more compelling perspective on sort of discrimination and isolation than, a movie that would be kind of like a prestige movie that looks at how a German family living in the US in the
Right.
South, specifically at that
In
time,
1918.
yeah,
1918. Yeah.
would be handled, because there's no real scene where like the town village comes to the farm and says, we're not going to buy any of your crops or foods because you're German or things like
Well,
that.
they
It's
also send their daughter, who sounds like she's
American,
from, yeah.
to do all of the errands and things like that. So I think that's interesting in itself, that the conflict is there, but it's not overly showy or just completely consuming of what the plot is supposed to be about. It gets around that in a very interesting way. And then, you mentioning the town, but even, the livestock in the barn, and the corn and the crops, there is this kind of fake facade of that period of filmmaking of that time that works really well, in terms of showing you kind of the Hollywood side of things, where everything has kind of a slightly kind of, plasticky kind of look, or again, a
Yeah.
fake facade overall. And I think that works really, really well, for the film. And again, thinking that both of these movies were shot in New Zealand during the pandemic, and they are actually depicting a pandemic as it's happening on
I think that
top
was
of
a
a
very
war.
smart way to do that too.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
and it felt both those parallels to now, but like also like, oh shit, yeah, I guess that would have been it.
And it's
Um,
super campy. Like, I think it is
it
like
is
a
campy in a good
funny
way though.
movie at
Yeah,
times. You'll never look at a pig roast maybe the same way again. And also, there's this final shot specifically, the for the end credits, that a lot of people have been posting online about since it's been open. That is really unsettling, but also kind of comic.
similar
And
to Call Me by Your Name, you know.
yeah,
Like,
I said, like, as soon as I finished watching the movie, I said to a couple of people that this is literally going to be John Waters' favorite film. It has that kind of
uh-huh.
like campy serial mom kind of
I'll make
vibe
sure to
to it.
post when he puts his top films of the year and it's at number one, then I'll give you credit, don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah, because it's got to be on there. If it's not on there, like,
If
I
it's
don't.
not number one, it's at least in the top 10 somewhere, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's just one of those movies that I
I
think.
mean, if Marty says that, come on.
Yeah, maybe he won't now because of Scorsese. Maybe it's too cool for school now. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, I just want to quickly go back to that monologue. It's interesting that
Yeah,
this
please.
year
It's great.
that you have two monologues in films that are centerpieces for the actors giving exposition or character background, with this, and also Rebecca Hall in Resurrection, where the camera's on her for what feels like a good 10 to 15 minutes as she explains backstory to her own, tragic, life, and a moment in her life that brought her, complete sorrow, and it was also extremely disturbing. So I think that that's interesting as well, just having genre movies that are character focused on women, having moments of contemplation and realization, and being able to share, because again, at this time, therapy was not really a thing.
Of course,
So it
yeah.
kind of feels like you're even watching a therapy session in a weird way.
Totally. Unrelated, but I just finished The Bear, and there's a great monologue in the last episode of The Bear that's about 10 minutes long from what's his name? Jeremy Allen something?
Slate,
Slate, yeah.
because
Um
he just got cast in two things, so he's going to be
he's on fire right now, man. After
in
The Bear, like,
Fingernails with Jesse Buckley and Riz
yeah.
Ahmed, and then he's going to be in Sean Durkin's The Iron Claw with Zach
This
Efron,
has
which is about the
this
Von
has
Erichs.
this has nothing to do with X, just because there was
Yeah.
a monologue, and he's great, and everyone should go watch The Bear. It's fucking incredible. But X is great. Also, shout out to Howard for staying with Pearl. You know, like,
See,
I
that's the
was
movie
like,
I want to see a sequel to, a prequel
yeah,
sequel, because like that I think would be interesting to see how that dynamic between the two evolved over, the decades getting to
yeah.
X. Because obviously now we're
Because
going to jump to the 80s with Maxine,
do you
and
think he does
probably
a fourth one where he goes in between? Like,
maybe I mean, he said that it's going to be a trilogy, but there's something curious about how like a couple, that kills together stays
stays
together,
together. Yeah,
right?
I know.
And with Maxine, like I can already kind of see the direction it's going in, where like you're going to look at, again, pornography in the 80s was when the VHS boom was kind of happening, and a lot of that. I mean, Boogie Nights covers this too, where like a
Yeah,
lot of it was on VHS, and even just horror movies in general, there was a market for it then. And I'm sure there's going to be more of Maxine dealing with, her being, or escaping her religious
yeah. The
cults, and
trauma of that. Yeah.
yeah, and maybe becoming a serial killer as well. I don't know, but like it does seem like there is stuff that you can kind of get an idea or a sense of what that third movie is going to be. But I would love to actually see more with Pearl and Howard, and sort of how that relationship develops, because it is an interesting place where they leave it. and where it
And they
could
stay
go.
together. So
Yeah,
you're like, all right, bro.
it could be like the
You
honeymoon killers, basically.
you must really love this woman. I'm gonna give the movie a 3.5. I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 3.5, and an Affleck duck.
Sure. Thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode, we have lots of TIFF reviews out right now. So go check all of those out over on Untitled Movie Reviews. If you want a big 2+ hour roundup where Eric and I give our full rankings of the films that we saw at the festival, as well as kind of our experience as a whole, go check out the latest episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast, episode 132, where we talk about TIFF 22. One-stop shop for everything. Head over to Letterboxd at Untitled_movies. And as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com, as well as on Family Feud Canada, which is season 4 is now airing on CBC and CBC Gem, Monday through Thursday at 7:30 p.m. You'll see my questions. You won't know which questions are mine, but I'll just say it's all the ones that you think are good. All the bad ones, not me.
Not a bad one in the
I
bunch.
I've been selfishly flipping through, not selfishly, what would you call it? Like, anyways, I'm only looking for my questions when I watch the show. Like, I'm like fast forward and skipping through, and I go, "Ooh, that one's mine." 90% of the time, I go, "Did I write that?" I don't know. I forget. I wrote so much. So go check that out, and then follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric March, and you can find more of my video reviews. Do a little bit still that TIFF brain coming through on rogerstv.com/cinemascene. Matt and I did a half an hour version of a TIFF wrap up. So if you don't want to listen or watch the 2+ hour version, you can watch the truncated one when it will be available. I'll post it on all the social medias at EM6211 and on the Untitled accounts as well.
Until next time.
Mother of pearl, I'm married.